So really, what is a hash? In other words, a LM hash, a LAN manager hash. Well, let's take a look at a password. For instance, in our example here, we have 1234556 QWERTY. So this is our password, and let's look at how this will be hashed using the LAN manager hash. Basically, the password is run through the algorithm, and the first thing that happens for LAN manager, that is it converts everything to uppercase. Once it converts everything to uppercase, it looks at how long is that password. Now, LAN manager will use 14 characters, whether you provide 14 characters or not. So if there is not 14 characters in the password, then what it's going to do is it's going to pad it with blank characters or null characters. In other words, it's going to pad that password. Now, it'll take and encrypt that password. Now, before it encrypts it, what it does is splits that in half. 7 on the first half and 7 on the second half. And then each individual string is encrypted. And then after I encrypt each separate string of 7, I take the results and I concatenate them to form my hash. Now, what makes this interesting is that I can use different tools like LoftCrack, for instance, to go ahead and try to brute force these different hashes. LoftCrack has the ability to go about, about 3 million words in less than 4 minutes. So it's really a very, very effective tool for cracking this hash, and especially because that hash is split into 7s. So what happens is you have the first 7 characters, which are hashed, and the second 7, and then I put them together. So as you can imagine, what happens is if my passwords are not sufficient length, in other words, if I don't have at least 8 characters, that second hash will always be the same, because that second half will always be hashed the same. So all I have to do as a cracker is examine those hashes. And if I see this particular value for the second half of that, those second bytes, or the second half of those bytes, then I know that they only have a password of 7 characters or less. And this makes it much, much easier. And it's one of the things that LoftCrack will do right off the bat, is examine the second half of that hash to try to determine exactly if they have 8 characters or not. Some other tools that can be used, and these tools are quite effective, are pwdump and pwdump2 and 3. Now, these passwords basically takes and decrypts the password file. What it does is use an algorithm offline to actually brute force this file. Now, even though I can have Windows NT or Windows 2000 passwords hashed on my system, I can use pwdump3 to actually remotely grab those passwords and grab those files. Now, I do have to have administrative permissions on the remote system that I am accessing these files, but again, if I have already cracked a particular password, or if I have already elevated an older account, then I can go ahead and dump this down. Another tool I could use is called Rainbow Crack. Now, Rainbow Crack is a hash cracker. It basically computes all the different possibilities in plain text and stores them in advance. And it uses this rainbow table, if you will, to apply it to those password files until it finds the appropriate match. Now, Kerberos is a much better authentication mechanism. However, Kerberos can still be cracked. And one of the tools that we use for that is called KerbCrack. And KerbCrack basically has 2 different pieces. The first piece is called KerbSniff, and the second piece is referred to as KerbCrack. What happens is KerbSniff actually sniffs and listens on the network looking for Kerberos logins. Once it finds the Kerberos logins, then the cracker can record that information and then use the login information to actually brute force it by using KerbCrack. So while this is more secure than LAN Manager or NTLM, it's still not something that cannot be cracked. If I have NetBIOS running on my network, then I could use something like NBT Deputy. Basically, what NBT Deputy does is cause the system itself to confuse itself. In other words, it causes the system to take its NetBIOS name and send out this NetBIOS query result. Once I get this IP or this NetBIOS name, I can resolve it to an IP address. Once I have that IP address, I can use another tool called SMB Relay. And what this does is basically run on the computer and kind of confuse the computer so that it doesn't know where it's going to log on to. So then what happens is whenever somebody tries to go to My Network Places, By using SMB, I can go actually intercept that information that goes with that logon. In other words, when they try to go to my network places, and then I can go ahead and take that information and crack that. Another very, very popular tool out there is called Legion. Now, Legion automates the whole process of using NetBIOS and guessing what their passwords can be. I can basically do multiple Class C IP addresses, and I can try to compromise each one of these accounts. It's a very, very common tool. I can also use this with a dictionary as well. I can take many of the different dictionary files that are out there, load them into Legion, and then use this tool to automate my password cracking attempts. Another form of attack is NetBIOS DOS attack, or denial of service. Now, this is not really an attack to stop somebody or to crack a user's account, but it is a tool that can be used with NetBIOS to get somebody off of the system. In other words, have their system so it will not function. Once their system will not function, then I can try other methods to try to isolate those different user accounts. Basically, what this does is it sends a NetBIOS name release message to the name service on any NT or 2000 machine. And basically what this does, when the system releases this name, the system can't use that common name. So as a result now, the client will disconnect from that NetBIOS network. And there are many different tools that I can use to actually cause this to launch this denial of service. One of the most effective ways to do this is to run this against an entire LAN. In that case, all of the machines will come offline. In other words, I will corrupt all of the NetBIOS information on that particular LAN. Another tool that's been around for quite a while is called John the Ripper. And John the Ripper is a command line tool, and it has Unix variants and NT variants, or Windows variants. And basically what it will do is crack different passwords. Now, the one catch to John the Ripper is that the passwords are case insensitive. So the password that you get may not represent the real mixed case password. But still, it's a very popular, very common tool, and it can be used in many cases to crack your user accounts.